Chapter 2. Ouch. Big time. The car door. Ambush. Think. In the milliseconds it took the pain to bloom, I remembered what I could about the car. Dark windows. Dark night. But not that dark. Tinted. New. Clean. Jaguar. Too expensive for the average soldier. Should have noticed. The metaphorical bucket drew up a splashing load from the pain well. Sucky start for my Friday night. Act. I did a couple of things at the same instant. The first, I began cell regeneration. Vampires differ from other humans in many ways. One cool thing we can do is regrow and replace tissue one cell at a time and pretty quickly. Doesn't matter if it's heart, brain, or skin. Other people can kind of do it too, though it takes much longer. The English word is healing. I don't know what you'd call it in German. Here's one place we diverge. I can regrow organs. I can even regrow my head. Neat, huh? At the moment, I had one lung that needed some work. The other action. I reached behind to grab a piece of my attacker. I didn't need his throat. Not yet, anyway. Later? Abso-freaking-lutely. I just needed enough to slow him up. Our reflexes are fast. Super fast. I'll draw a picture. Hold 5 pennies in a closed fist. Open your hand and then close it. Quick as you can. Here's what I can do in the instant your hand remains open. Grab all 5 pennies, arrange them by date, tuck the oldest 2 in my pocket, the youngest 2 in yours. That last coin, I'll flip, and you can call heads or tails after you've closed your hand on nothing. And a big nada was exactly what I felt behind me. No attacker, no knife, no anything. I glanced back. Nothing. Uh-oh. Only 2 things could move that fast. One would be Super Rumble, diving for the last stalker boy standing on a tray marked free samples. The other would be me or someone else like me. Since I'd just seen Super Rumble torture her bug with a sea freighter's load of snacks for her many male guests, and since we'd already returned the jaws of life to the garage for the evening and extraction couldn't happen here, Knifer must be a vampire. Double. Uh-oh. The bit I told you about regeneration? Fast, but not instantaneous. Wound a vampire, and you can impede him, if only for a short while. You probably can't kill us because you don't know how. That's the good news. Another vampire? Different story. They'll have the knowledge. That's the bad news. I've seen a vampire die. Once. And I can assure you, we don't fast decay into a mummy that blows away in the wind or melt into a smoking puddle of goo. Remember what I just said about cell regeneration? Use your head and figure it out. Vampire on vampire crime will never reach political platform status, but it hits close enough to home to cause me more than a passing interest. Bottom line, a bleeding vampire is a vulnerable vampire, and I could feel the back of my jacket getting soggy. I glanced around for Knifer. Nowhere. Not quite true, because as I checked down the hill towards downtown Wiesbaden, someone drove my face into the pavement. Would it be redundant to say a vampire with a smashed face is a vulnerable vampire? I struggled. Duh. Despite my leaking lung, I managed to marshal enough strength to pull a locomotive through the eye of a needle. Knifer countered my best moves with equal strength. Darn it. And when it felt like I was getting the upper hand a couple of times, it turned out an illusion as he used superior leverage to employ my strength against me. First, I get stiffed by Super Rumble. Now my own powers were cheating on me with another guy. To sum it up, a murderous super being straddled my back like a rodeo cowboy. I'd eaten enough road gravel to pave Bill Gates' new driveway, and my left lung was as flat as Paris Hilton before the augmentation. All of a sudden, trying to squeeze out a whole dollar out of Super Rumble didn't seem so important. But all that wasn't the worst item on my personal local news report. Nothing stunk. I'm not talking about the situation. That stunk big time. I mean, stink, as in literally. Nothing stunk. Bad news. There's a reason why there's no such thing as vampire courts with kings and lords waltzing about with gorgeous vampirinas in the great candlelit halls of some remote castle. It's the same reason vampires will never unite to subjugate the world. It's also how we sense another vampire in our territory. We can't stand each other's stench. Think open latrine trenches for a 1 million strong Hun army. Think gutters of Paris after 400 years of no underground sewage system. Think home crowd at a University of Tennessee football game. You get the picture. There are exceptions for every rule. 2 here. The first exception: vampires can't sense members of the Seven. May not sound like much to you, but worrisome enough for me at that rock-gnawing moment that it almost drove me to create a more personal stink of my own in my designer boxers. The Seven. I use capital letters out of both respect and fear. And, of course, the chance that one of them might read this. They hold absolute rule in the vampire world, and they aren't elected. We're talking about being so ruthless in eliminating nonconformists that Joseph Stalin would have felt compelled to raise his hand for permission to fart. And it was possible one of the Seven was playing the Lone Ranger and I was playing Silver. But it didn't feel right. I don't mean the wet gravel grinding my face in a grated cheese. That kind of thing never feels right. I need to change my shirt and jeans before Friday night beer with the baggers, if I lived. Oh, and I'd also need to change my face. Like, at least grow back my lips and eyebrows. In addition to stab wounds, a lung beginning to show signs of painful inflation, a killer with the strength of a team of oxen lying prone atop my back, and a tip from Super Rumble too tiny to make gravity notice. What else felt wrong? The weight, for one thing. Probably natural to think beings as bad as the Seven would look like the Terminator's somatically superior older brother. And notice how I didn't capitalize the Terminator like I did the Seven. Let's take a true or false test. I'll even start with the answers. True. Each of the Seven is bad. False. Each of the Seven is big and bad. Here's the secret. The Seven are the absolute oldest living vampires created from the prime, if you can believe the lore. Each of the Seven came from the deep in the sub-Saharan African jungle. Yes, it's getting weird. Here's the kicker. They also come from one of those lost to civilization pygmy tribes. It gets better. Make that cannibal pygmy tribes. As I said, the weight didn't feel right. Another situational disconnect solved the identity problem. I didn't need eyes in the back of my head to identify Knifer as the non-pygmy type. Keep in mind, I'm a solid heterosexual when I say that Knifer's bulk felt like no pygmy I'd ever experienced. I think that may have come out wrong. The second giveaway? Knifer was dry humping me. That last sentence will likely be edited out of the final draft. I could feel his breath as he leaned close to my ear. "Who's your girlfriend?" he asked. I recognized the voice. "Get off me, Sparky." The weight lifted, and I could breathe as freely as any guy with a freshly punctured lung. "It's Spartacus," he said, and he slapped me in the butt as he rolled off. Sparky isn't gay, though from time to time he thinks there's some advantage to encouraging that perception. "No," I said. "Spartacus died a long time ago." "Crucified," Sparky said, "with his wife holding his baby beside his cross." Did his voice actually hitch with emotion? Nah, everything's a game for Sparky. "How romantic," he said. "Movie, dude," I said, "not real life." Even 1- and 2-syllable words made me want to scream in pain. Sparky sat down on the curb I crawled over and managed to pull up beside him. Every breath I took felt like I drew in broken glass rather than air. Damn, it hurt. "By the way," I said, "she's not my girlfriend." Sparky stared for a moment with that look that sneered, "Yeah, sure." Nothing for a few more seconds and then, "You two look good together." The thought gave me one of those puke burps, the kind that burns the back of your throat and goes a little way up your nose. It would take the better part of a half-century to shed that awful picture. Pretty much a wide-awake nightmare. And those thoughts did nothing to help repair the lung. The best way to get Sparky to drop things? Stop acknowledging him. I sat in silence for a few moments, long enough to confirm, yes, I really did hurt like heck. But I wasn't going to let him know that. So I said, "I hurt like all get out." Sparky smiled. "Don't be a baby." And then, "The knife in the back thing? Remind you of anyone?" "Yes, it does," I said. Of course my lung picked that moment to reinflate. We're talking whole new shoot staples into your left eyeball to get your mind off the pain kind of experience. I couldn't help but grimace. It reminds me of you once every 75 years or so. Sparky raised his eyebrows in the universal question mark way. Knife, I said. Back. One-word sentences. Pain relegated my language skills to match those of the Seven when they were still cute little pygmy cannibals and not yet nearly immortal superhuman machines of horror, each with a PhD from some fly-by-night diploma mill, like Cambridge University or Harvard. Arrogant little twits. Exactly, Sparky said, as if that explained anything at all. I empathize with anyone who's confused here, but Sparky's prank proves convenient because it points to subtle nuances of the vampire culture. Think about the times a friend or family member pulled the boo trick on you. You know, they hide somewhere and spring out to make you jump. Fun. Vampires do the same thing, only we play a bit rougher. You aim to spill coffee, we aim to spill blood. Since we're nearly immortal, we can take the boo trick further. Think explosives or hollow point bullets and you get the picture. Or stick a knife into a buddy's lung. No harm really, because everything grows back. The trick's a lot funnier when it's not me who's left with a lung to inflate. I said earlier there are two exceptions to the stench that repels vampires from one another. The first exception applies to the Seven. Nobody knows for sure how they mask their indelicacy. Indelicacy does sound better than smelling worse than a skunk's butt. A strong hypothesis exists regarding the Seven that all vampires pretty much buy into. As I mentioned while describing Sparky's psychotic practical joke, we in the collective vampire world believe it has something to do with how those little ugly, murdering, arbitrary sons of miniature dachshunds created themselves from the prime. And let me add here that I have the utmost respect and admiration for the little guys, just in case they've learned to read. The second exception has to do with how we create ourselves. I'm laying out our biggest secret early, and thus putting my anatomical jewels in your hands. Here's how it happens. You become a vampire when you eat the living heart out of another vampire. I know some of you amateur Einsteins or budding Van Helsings will say, wait a minute, how was the first vampire, the Prime, created? Lucky for you, I prepared myself for that with a detailed answer. Here it is. I don't know. And it's not as if we of the vampire world haven't been discussing the Genesis enigma for the past 2,000 years. First in letters, now by phone, never in person because of the stink. Think of the Genesis enigma as the classic chicken or the egg thing. For my part, I'm weary of the circular debate, but if you figure out the answer, send me an email. My address is imavampire@youaredefinitelyWrong.com. The rest of you non-amateur Einsteins or vampire hunters are thinking, ew, he ate a living heart? Guilty. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Well, no it didn't. Have you ever been talked into doing something you knew you didn't want to do? Something that sounded stupid at first blush and didn't get any more brilliant once you thought about it? And you did it anyway? Remember the guy sitting beside me on the curb? The one who filleted my lung? Sparky. I don't blame Sparky for my eating the Roman's heart, even though it was all his idea, and he was the one who cut the thing out of the wounded guy. I absolutely don't blame Sparky. Well, he did shove that raw piece of meat against my lips after I'd said no a few times. And since Sparky would just not take no for an answer, enough Roman heart dribbled into me to make me what I am. No, I don't blame him one tiny bit. The bastard. Really though, I blame myself for ever calling a numbskull like Sparky my friend. I should have listened to my father. Maybe then I wouldn't have to spend the last 2,000 years hearing an endless loop of my father's voice. That Sparky-ist boy just isn't right in the head. Stay away from him or you'll end up doing something stupid. Thanks, Dad. So I took a bite of that cursed apple. Well, hard to be specific, but this is the last metaphor I'm going to explain. You're on your own for the rest. The other two, who also partook, those are the vampires I can't sense. They smell the same to me as they do to you. Someone once interviewed a fictional vampire. I know you want to get back to the curb outside the commissary, but I also know you have a few questions rolling around in your mind. You can't ask them, but I can. So I'll take a moment and interview myself. Here goes.